Hey crafters, it's Sarah here with Craft Test Dummies, and today I wanted to go over with you guys Ranger Inc.'s new embossing powder program. Ranger has had their embossing powders out for years and years and years, and they're a great staple to have in your craft stash. But they newly revamped the line at this last CHA, and so I kind of wanted to go over the basics of these embossing powders with you guys. So first, starting off, before we go into the powders, what do you emboss with? Well, you can emboss with any kind of embossing ink pad. Many different brands use them. Since I am a Ranger girl, I personally like the Distress Embossing Ink and their regular Emboss It Clear. One interesting thing to note too is if you have distress inks, these can be used as an embossing powder as well in any color, not just the embossing one. So that's kind of nice if you want to use different colors in the distress line and you just have the one clear embossing powder. One other cool thing about these is that they are scented with cinnamon. So if you don't like stinky things in your craft room, it's nice to have something that smells good. Another thing that you can use for embossing that I really like are the Perfect Medium pens that Ranger has if you want to do some handwriting or journaling or doodling. And then they also have the Emboss It pen. One other thing that you can use that they have is the Emboss It Dabber. This is the exact same formula as your embossing pads, but it comes in the handy dandy dabber bottle if you are doing a larger stamp, or let's say if you wanted to emboss a piece of grunge board or chipboard. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing. Now off to our basics with our embossing powders. Your basics are going to be your gold, copper, white, black, and silver and clear embossing powders. These come in a regular detail, and then they also come in superfine detail, and you'll see it labeled superfine on the packaging. Just to show you guys, this is what the older packaging looks like. So if you have these in your stash, you're good to go. Exact same formula. They just redid the packaging a little bit. Here's a quick little sample swatch of some of the colors that I have in my stash. The white, the copper, and the gold. I really like the gold. It's a really nice color. Now, the difference between the regular embossing powder and the superfine detail is just in particle size. And I wanted to make sure you guys know that your ultra thick embossing enamel is a larger particle size than your regular embossing powder that's not that deep, that's not the spelled out in superfine detail. So don't get these too confused. These are still different particle sizes. The nice thing about the superfine detail is it's the exact same kind of plastic that's used in the regular embossing powder. It's just been ground down to a different particle size. And this is so that if you have an image that has really fine detail, you don't need as much powder to grab onto your ink. And so here's the same stamp that I use, the Fabulous Flourish. And here you can see I use the regular copper embossing powder. And then here I use the superfine detail. One happy little accident that I found when I was doing this is I accidentally had a hair stuck to my stamp there, and you can see the superfine embossing powder still stuck to it, and you still get that small detailed line in there. So I thought that was pretty cool. Next up, you have your opaque embossing powders, and these are really nice when they are embossed. You get a really great kind of shiny and, again, opaque look to your embossing powders. These come in lots of different colors. These are just some that I have in my own stash. I really like these. They're bright, they're poppy, and they melt really quickly. Next up, you have your specialty embossing powders. With specialty embossing powders, they're all a little bit different. There's lots of them. Again, these are just ones that I have in my stash. Starting out, we'll go in and we'll talk about the tinsels. I really like the tinsels, and I have a personal love for these, as I'll show you guys here. The red embossing tinsel was honestly the very first product I bought from Ranger when I was about 11 or 12 years old. So I've had this in my stash for a long time. These are great embossing powders. And what's special about these is that they have a heat stable glitter in them. So if you use a different other kind of glitter or something, it's going to melt when you hit it with that heat gun. The Ranger embossing powders have that heat stable glitter, and then it's mixed with a clear embossing powder so that when you melt it, that clear embossing powder is going to grab onto those little heat stable glitter particles and hold it to your image. So here's a sample of the red, snowflake, and blue, which you can see they're pretty poppy and pretty sparkly. I really love these guys. Then we also have a couple lines from a couple embossing powders from the Antiquities line. I really like the Turquoise. This is your regular, kind of a regular embossing powder, but you have different colored particles inside of here, not just one color. So you've got a turquoise, you've got a little bit of black, you've got some gold in there, and it gives a really cool effect. Other than just embossing a stamped image, you can cover like a piece of Tim's ideology in it, and that's what I did here. I just stamped it on straight onto my ink pad and then dipped it into a little tray I had with the turquoise embossing powder, and then heated it and sanded it down, and you get a pretty cool antique kind of vintagey look there. The other one that I have here that I want to show you guys is the frosted crystal. The important thing to note about the frosted crystal is that you don't want to overheat this guy. If you overheat it, you're going to get a different look, which I'll show you in just a second. The frosted crystal is supposed to have kind of a matte finish to it, and it's going to have a texture almost like your distress embossing powders. And so what I mean by that here is I have two little samples I'll show you. The same stamp. And you can kind of see it better here. This is the proper way to emboss your frosted crystal. You can see that it's got a matte finish and that it's got kind of a fun, it's almost like a sandpaper texture to it. And what's cool about that is you can use it with, let's say, perfect pearls, or recently Tim had on his blog with one of his 12 tags of 2014. You can do a really fun chalkboard effect with that. Here's the one you can see got overheated. It has that shiny and kind of, again, the softer texture to it. So good thing to note. Just watch it while you are embossing. Now, one other thing that we have to note majorly here with the specialty embossing powders is the Distress line. Distress has been out for quite a few years now in the embossing powders, and we're used to having it with all of the colors that we're used to in Distress. And now it's been sized down to just 4. And the antique linen and the pumice stone has been a little bit revamped from their previous colors. So you will see a difference with that. And these, again, you're going to have a texture to them when you emboss them. It's going to have a toothiness. And then the other special thing about these is that they have release crystals with them. And what I mean by that is that you have these crystals mixed in with your embossing powders, and once you heat it up and you swipe away those release crystals, you're going to get a more distressed effect. So with this, for example, here's one that I haven't swiped down yet with my hand, and this is how the pumice stone looks if you just stamp it and emboss it, and that's it. And then once you kind of wipe down, you can use your hand if you want a more distressed look. You can use a little bit of a light sandpaper. But you can see here that you get definitely that more distressed kind of worn look. And it's, again, got that really cool texture to it that I love. Well, crafters, that's about it. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the new embossing powder program from Ranger. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. I would be happy to answer them. And I hope you have a crafty day. Bye, guys.